I'm going to start off talking about this work at its highest level. It's the biggest picture of this work, and that is what people call spiritual awakening. I imagine you've heard of that term, and like me, realise that it's very difficult to describe. You could say that it is the replacement of your normal view of the world that you've inherited from the culture you're brought up in, the religion you're brought up in, from scientism or whatever, with one that honours higher consciousness far more. The process of attaining this shift in consciousness is also sometimes called initiation. The word obviously implies new beginnings, that you've undergone a process which has set in motion a change that will result in a more awakened state. I'm not going to struggle on and try to define more what spiritual awakening or initiation are, but instead I'm going to talk about some of the changes in attitude we need to make to actually just do this work, to cultivate our magical thinking in order to be able to do this initiatic work. Firstly, you're going to have to think in terms of matter not being the primary reality. This is a dogma of our culture, of the religion of scientism, of the religion of extending scientific ideas into cultural influences which are essentially nonsensical. Take an example of how this works. Years and years ago, I read Plato, and I didn't get it at all. What's he going on about? This realm of being, which is more real than the things we see with our everyday eyes. I came back to it many years later and it clicked. I understood he was talking about subjectivity. He was talking about the experience we have of the world as being primary, and matter, what we see with our eyes, what we sense with our senses, being a secondary effect. I think it's fair to say that I no longer really believe in matter in the way that I used to when I was brought up. Matter is just a theory. It's just a way of explaining certain aspects of our experience and getting certain useful features of them to work for us. But it's not our primary experience. Our primary experience is subjective. This is why Kabbalists say that Malkuth, the sphere of the earth, the lowest of the Sephiroth, is a pendant to the rest of the tree, that it's not a sort of independent thing in itself. Not that any of the Sephira are. They're all relational. We'll come on to that later. But Malkuth, the sphere of matter and the earth, is a pendant. It's something which depends from our subjective experience, which is covered by the rest of the tree. So I've talked a little bit about the basic attitude for doing initiatic work. I'd like to move on, talk a little bit about how path workings and this type of work actually happens, how it works. This kind of thing, guided meditations, of which path working is one type, are what Carl Jung called active imagination. What we're doing is a bit like looking at the symbols in a dream, except we're priming ourselves with symbols to start with. These symbols come preloaded. They're part of what Jung called the collective unconscious. In other words, they're part of the dreams of the whole human race. And when we expose ourselves to them, they trigger processes in us, inner processes. This is different from using symbols to create magical effects by acts of will, where you choose a symbol or a sigil and focus on it in order to change your external reality. This is not like that. And the attitude of Kabbalistic pathworking and other active imagination is more similar to an attitude of prayer, insofar as you open yourself up to the symbol and allow it to act upon you, allow your deep subconscious forces to act as triggered by the symbol. These active symbols may also act upon you to remind you of things you need to work on. So there's an element of something a little bit like psychotherapy to doing active imagination, to doing path workings. There'll be gaps in your own development or blocks in your own development which might be shown up by these symbols. So don't push yourself, don't be hard on yourself with this work. Give yourself a bit of space to assimilate the results of each path working. You might spend a bit of time each day, just a few minutes of meditation on what's happened, just to let those symbols act freely so that they've got time and space to work through you. This process of allowing the symbol to work through you is unique for everybody. Some symbols that you find difficult I might find easy, and vice versa. The symbols we work with fall into natural clusters of association or correspondence. There'll be some main quality that that's central to the way we organise those correspondences. With Qabalah, it's the sphere, the sephira, or the path that is the main symbol, and other symbols cluster around each of them. So, for instance, you think of the colour red, you should get an association with Mars, with blood, with the smell of pepper, with the metal iron, and various other things. When you work with Qabalah, you'll also associate all of those things to the Sephira Gebura. Similarly, Venus, the planet Venus in astrology, makes us think of love, the colour green, and the rose, amongst other things. And these in Qabalah are all attributed to the Sephira Netzach. So we build up a whole set of correspondences as we work with Qabalah. You may find that processes you're undergoing with a particular Kabbalistic symbol are reflected in your external life, creating things that Jung called synchronicities. This is natural to this kind of work. The first kind of occult contemplation I ever did, long before I was seriously into magic or keeping a magical diary, was just to think about the zodiac sign that the sun was in at that time of year and look for associations with that. So, for instance, in late November to late December, I'd be thinking about Sagittarius, and I'd be looking for correspondences around the colour blue, the planet Jupiter, the element fire, and so on. That's how it works with Qabalah too. So that last part is all about the cultivation of magical thinking, the ability to make associations between things that work for you at a level of collective unconscious, at a level of dream, but done with the conscious mind too. Okay, so I'm going to move on to a video about the Qabalah itself and the Tree of Life.